Welcome to Unpacking Autism with Reena Anand, the podcast where stories are shared, hearts are touched, and we grow together in empowerment to help our autistic children thrive. Hi everyone, thank you for joining today's podcast where I will be speaking to the amazing Dr. Rachel Taylor. Dr. Rachel is a cognitive neuroscientist who developed the first theory of well-being for people with autism. She is extremely passionate about supporting everyone to live their best lives and improve their daily performance. And she does this through her website content, podcasts, speaking engagements, and so much more. And she's on a special mission to inform everyone about how where people live within themselves informs their destiny. She's a northerner living in the south of the UK, has 3 children, 2 cats, and in her words, not mine, one extremely dry sense of humour. You can find Dr. Rachel on www.unbroken.me and on the Unbroken podcast, links for which are on the website. I first came across Dr. Rachel at one of my previous places of work, and she came to speak around the importance of well-being, but at a much deeper level than I had ever previously engaged with, like talking about the brain and the reaction to emotion and how it manifests in us physically. And as an autism parent, I was really struggling with self-care, and I was in very much self-sacrifice mode. It was all about Evie. I had neglected my other relationships, and I thought that this was the best way to serve him by just putting all my energy into him. And listening to Dr. Rachel and really taking on board some of the very practical well-being tips, which were digestible and things I could incorporate into a day that I didn't feel had any pockets of time, meant that was part of my reflective journey on how important it was that I looked after myself, and that that's not indulgent or just a nice thing to have, but actually really necessary for me to be the parent I wanted to be for Evie and be able to give to all my relationships in the way I wanted to, but also be full myself. And so I'm really, really thrilled that Dr. Rachel is going to come and talk about her experience, her passion for autism and neuroscience, the amazing work that she does. And, you know, bearing in mind, lots of people listening will be parents who have autistic children. I hope that towards the end, Rachel's also going to share some amazing, really practical tips that maybe we could try to incorporate into our life to just help us keep ourselves topped up. So I keep calling you Dr. Rachel because that's how I see you. I know you've Rachel, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm absolutely delighted that you've made time and very grateful to have you here. Hi,
and thank you so much for inviting me on. I was like over the moon when you did. I was like, oh, this is so exciting, because I know you are on a real mission yourself. So yeah, it's always exciting to be part of somebody's mission. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. So let's start with like your why. What is it? What is it about autism, and why are you so passionate, you know, about this area in particular?
I think the why is, you know, I've always been a little bit different myself. You know, I've always been on the fringe of society. I like to say, you know, the bell-shaped curve, like the majority of them, I'm not even an outlier. I'm like way off somewhere else. And it took me, you know, like I'm 44 years old. It's took me probably the best part of 42 of those to think that's okay. And, you know, so I've always known what it's like to not quite fit in, you know, not quite be as everybody else. And then when I was actually commencing my studies for my original PhD, which meant to be around the emotion of joy, I happened to sit in on a lecture which basically said that people with autism couldn't be happy. And I was like, what? You know, I was just like, this was something completely different and something that I'd never heard before. And I was like, surely that's not quite right. And my original plan was to do a bit of a side hustle alongside my PhD and just think, is this true? And then the more I spoke to people, the more I delved into it, I thought, this is a story that's never been told. This is something that's never been looked at. You know, researchers have looked at the minutiae of brain function or the minutiae of gut biome, you know, people with autism, but nobody had ever actually looked at sort of the well-being and happiness. And, you know, some of your listeners might know this, but for those who don't, it's so shocking. is that even in the 21st century, people with autism tend to die between 15 and 20 years before people who are neurotypical. And I don't think that's okay. And, a lot of that, can be combined with, basically their quality of life and well-being. So my why was I completely shifted my PhD studies. It's like, right, I know joy is important, but we'll put that to one side and we'll do something that hasn't been done at all before, ever. And I sort of moved into a whole world of people who had never been listened to, had never really felt accepted, who feel like that just survival is good enough, and who feel like, they're apologetic for their differences. They're aware of so acutely aware of who they are and what that means in terms of society. And, basically limit themselves. I had one person who was part of my research who he went salsa dancing once a week. And that was his human contact, because he knew that everybody had to dance with everybody else in that class. And I often during the pandemic, when we were all forced into inhumane isolation, I think about people like him, where that was their only human contact, because they limit themselves so much because they are so acutely aware that they're different. So, I am aware that I might have got my soapbox, but this is why I am so, passionate about it, because no one person should feel that they have to contrive human contact, and that's the only way that they can do it. We should be accepting of difference and understanding, and actually thinking that difference is good. Why should I be bothered if someone has to self-stimulate in front of me, or someone has a meltdown because actually their senses are over? Why does that matter to me? Why am I not okay sitting at the side of someone in pain? And this is, it's a huge thing. I always tell people, that I might do other stuff in sort of human performance, well-being and growth, but my passion project is always going to be neurodiversity, people with autism, and that's never going to change, because I'm getting quite emotional talking about it. It touched me right there when I was doing the read. It changed me fundamentally as a person.
Yeah.
And whenever I talk about it, I can see that people start thinking about it differently. And if I can just make someone think about it a little bit more differently, then I think that something can happen from that. So yeah, that's my why, Reena.
That's amazing. I think it's really interesting, actually, because whenever I ever used to have a meltdown in the early days, when I still was figuring out what is autism, like why is this autism? Is it just him acting out? What's going on? And people are watching. People felt visibly uncomfortable. And were really judgmental, if I'm out in public, actually, even in some of my wider family, when they see. So what is it about that? What is it about that behavior that makes people feel like that? So uncomfortable in their own in their own skin?
Well, I think some of it is that, generally people want to fix things. It's like you see somebody in pain, you see somebody upset. It's like, I want to make them feel better. I want to do something, and I'm being probably quite kind in thinking that most people want to do that. Maybe they don't, but I like to, when you see somebody in that, and it's like, I don't understand how to fix it. How do I make it stop? And people can get quite uncomfortable with that. Often, this is just not for autism. This is for everybody, every human being. When I say to people, the greatest gift you can give someone is when they are feeling, so distressed, when they are feeling in such pain, sit next to them and acknowledge it and just say, I see it. I don't need to fix you. I'm just gonna hold you for a while. I'm just gonna be at peace next to you until you're ready to talk to me about it. And I think that communication is a massive issue. And I think, we tend to take responsibility for everything that's happening in a room. It's all our fault. And I haven't got children with a diagnosis of autism. I've got children who, to me, are highly traded in various aspects of autism, but we can sort of say that most of us have some traits. When I presented my research and my findings at conferences, often people with autism or Asperger's will come up to me after and say, you must be undiagnosed, you must have autism, you must have Asperger's. And then I'm going, I'm really sorry. I'm always apologetic. I'm really sorry, but I don't think I have. And then they go, oh, you're in denial. We were there one day. We were in denial one day. And it's, it's really interesting that people who are neurodiverse find it really difficult to actually grasp that a neurotypical could get them, could understand them. And I think that this is sort of the thing when you're talking about, you with your son out in sort of the public or in your wider family. I think maybe some of your fear, correct me if I'm wrong, could have been they just don't understand me, and I need to put it because they don't understand him and they'll judge him. And I don't want them judging him because he's my little boy and he's the most amazing person in the world. He's just not like other people. Yeah. And I have to say, on a personal note, Reena, I often say in my head, just the general population, I'm just not like you. Yeah. That's one of my coping strategies. I'm just not like you. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of judgment because we're all meant to be the same, aren't we? Yeah. We're all meant to be the same, and we're not. Yeah. We're really not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, a part of that was also I just wanted validation. Yeah. From others that I was a good parent, because I didn't feel that self-validation, not that it was coming my way anyway, was enough, that I was enough to validate myself. And I see that in so many parents of autistic children, that they feel so shamed by others. They allow themselves to be so shamed by others. And it's not a criticism because, I've been there and it's taken me a long time to get to that place where I can say, this is my child. He's perfect exactly the way he is. And I am choosing right now to react in the way that I feel is best. I'm not adapting my reaction to what you think or think is appropriate. But that can be quite uncomfortable for a lot of people because, if they think it's lazy parenting. But I know what I'm doing. And I think there is this, when you are in a place where you don't have that self-care, that you just are seeking outward validation, that you're doing that you're okay, you're doing okay as a parent.
Yeah, because there's such a dissonance inside you, isn't there? It's just like, I love my child, they're amazing, but they're not like that other child over there, and it's and I think we're at such, we have to say as a society, we're failing so many people. Not just people with autism, but anybody who doesn't fit into the norm, who dares to challenge societal conditioning or normality, and, who dares to put the head above the parapet to say, hey, we need to consider this or we need to do that. And I think that it's not getting better. I think the polarization is getting worse. And something that I don't feel is really helpful is, when people's conditions are overly medicalized, and like it's the only thing that matters is the medical model. And just going back to your your comments on parenting, and it's really difficult because I see when I was on social media, I don't do that, but that's another story. We could talk about that another time. My hatred of all things social. But when you look at groups of parents who just want to have support from other parents with autism, and the memes that are used, and there's this like general assumption that to be a parent of an autistic child, you have to be a warrior. And that you've been chosen by God because you're so special, because you can cope with a child with autism. And I understand that that's, like you say, that validation, but that's not helpful for that child. Yeah, it's not helpful. And I just need I wanted to sort of say this, is that my research predominantly was in adults who had were diagnosed with autism, but those adults were once children, and your children are going to be adults. And this is the thing, it's, they don't grow out of autism. It's just, it's not, I say with teenagers, they'll grow out of it. Yeah. No, you don't grow out of autism. It's just that people with autism have to have special support to learn how to navigate a world that is really hostile, even for neurotypicals. So imagine if you have a brain that actually is super duper globalized in some areas, but really specialized and localized in others, trying to make sense of a world that is so nasty and mean and judgmental. And I am going to, I was talking about a hostile environment with my PhD supervisor. He said you need to be really careful about using that environment, with the home office have kind of got it. And I just said, but I don't know how else to describe an environment that is really unforgiving, that actually is full of toxicity, which people with autism tend to be more sensitive to, which have these rules that don't make sense to somebody who's neurotypical. So it's going to make no sense whatsoever at all to somebody who doesn't understand social rules. And I think for those of us who can advocate, and for those of us who are touched by this and who are passionate about this, I think we need to move away from the combative, I'm a warrior sort of pose, and into a more, I have lived experience, so I know what I'm talking about. This is our life, and I'm not going to apologize for it. But equally, I'm not going to let you get away with having zero compassion or zero kindness towards a child who is struggling with what's going on right now. And I think we need to move more into that, and move from that warrior where we're hiding in groups into this advocate role where we're actually saying we're all okay and you need to know this.
Yeah, completely. And I can see how if you perpetuate this ideology of a warrior, all of a sudden the bar is lifted, right? So you can tolerate more, everything is amplified, and actually you're now trying to fit into a construct which is really not serving you.
Unless everybody Boudikas or any, I don't want to just limit everybody to one type of warrior. Other warriors are available. But this is it, and it's you're quite right in that it's a construct, it's a social construct which has no sort of flexibility for the days when you are absolutely shattered yourself, when your energy is low, and you might not want to have to cope with a meltdown in the middle of the supermarket and the judgmental views. And you might actually have a meltdown of your own. Ken and Susan across the way, who are there, stood there with the trolleys, tut. What a bad mother, what a naughty child. And this is what we have to deal with, and it's just like, we all should be that little bit more kind and that little bit more compassionate, and actually understand that it's not a general thing. You see a child having a meltdown, that's not how children generally are. If it's happening, it's happening for a reason. And sometimes I'm having a meltdown in my head when I go shopping myself. It's just that I have the emotional regulation to know that it's all right in my head. I just can't do it out there. I'm fortunate like that.
I think I completely agree. I mean, the impact of kindness is just phenomenal. And I remember one time I was in the supermarket and there was a child. I think there's something also about being an autism parent that makes you so much more compassionate towards other children. And it's whereas, I think in so many ways I am a better human for being Evie's mum, because I've been able to identify the masks I was wearing and shed those and just live in authenticity. And I remember a child coming in the supermarket and diving into my basket and pulling out my grapes. And the father was just mortified, and I could tell that there was something. This child was probably autistic. There was a lot of similarity between him and Evie. And the father, you could tell, was beside himself. He looked really stressed. And I just gave him my grapes, and I was like, and I said, and I didn't need to say, oh, I'm a parent of an autistic child. It was just, it's fine. It's
Yeah.
okay.
You,
I'm going
you
to
just
go
have
over there,
that
get some
knowing
grapes.
look in your face, don't you? It's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, I've been there.
Have my grapes. It's really fine. I will go back round, get some more.
Yeah. It's just like, but there's something about a soft fruit. You can never rescue it, can you? Once it's been grabbed at, it's like, yeah, have it.
Oh, I honestly, I promise that's not what I was thinking, but yeah, it's true.
No, I won't go to that.
Yeah.
See, that's the difference, listeners. That's the difference between Reena and myself.
I something that you've talked about in the past that's, you're obviously hugely passionate about mental well-being, but I'm really keen to hear from you about the correlation, and if there is one, I guess, between autistic individuals and their mental well-being,
Yeah.
and what we know about that.
Well, interestingly, and quite timely, although I didn't quite realize it, this morning I was writing up some research and I was looking for some data to sort of back up my research, and I found something that was really really interesting and not nice, actually, in that somebody was looking at a meta-analysis of suicide rates in 2016 to 2020. And the prevalence rate of people with autism who were committing suicide, it was 10.8% of the suicides, which is so much higher than the prevalence of people with autism against the general population. And I thought, judging some sort of well-being really bugs me, because people tend to think of well-being, it's been hijacked by the yummy mummy brigade to a certain extent, where it's like, oh, get some smelly candles, go to yoga, whatever, oh, get some bath salts, all of it. And I'm not saying that they're not nice, so disclaimer, I do not disagree with all of that. But when I talk about well-being, I'm talking about keeping the body in homeostasis. I'm talking about keeping balance, enabling the best environments where somebody can be exactly who they want to be. Now, for me, that sets of research, which is recent. That's too recent for me. Where we're showing that kind of, like over 10% of suicides in the UK were from people who had a diagnosis of autism. And that shows to me that well-being is still not on the agenda. And what is really interesting to me is that I contacted many people in the NHS. I went to a couple of away days when they were looking at strategies with autism, and nobody was interested in my findings from my theory. Nobody was interested at all. And that was, it makes it so, it highlights that people with autism and the services that they connect with, they're not being served in terms of their well-being. And, something that's also really interesting, when you look at the various tools, and I say tools and measures and interventions that are available for people with autism, a lot of them are centered around, and for me, it's really telling, centered around how to teach autistic children on how to manage negative emotion. And what's really interesting for me about this is that in my research, people with autism were as averse to feeling joy because they couldn't stand the after effects of joy as they were to feel, they were quite happy with feeling anxiety. They were quite happy with, feeling frustration. That was the norm. That was familiar.
Yeah.
But if we are talking about well-being, it's universally known. There's so much research out there for neurotypicals that what underpins a feeling of well-being is the ability to feel positive affect, a positive emotion. And we've got nothing out there that any of the services use to sort of facilitate how people with autism can manage positive effects so that they don't get, the doom and gloom. Because when I felt really good, I can't stand to feel the lows after it. So they avoid it, and it makes me wonder, whether people have developed interventions, developed these tools because we are so uncomfortable with seeing people exhibit a negative emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all right with people who are just apathetic and you know, feel nothing, you know, the neutrality of it. And so we need to teach people to be sort of automatons.
Yeah.
You know, and when for the whole of well-being, how can somebody be well if they cannot experience, you know, joy at the sort of the ultimate point, but like sort of a eudaimonic and internal happiness at a sort of midpoint? So that's why sort of well-being is so important to me. The things that came out in my theory was that what was important to people with autism and their well-being was to have meaning in life. And people say, oh, that's, you know, that's pretty trite. You know, what does that mean? They had to know what their role was. They had to know that they were valued. They had to know that there was an importance to their being on, you know, the earth. And it was described in often poetic language in that, you know, if I don't have meaning, you know, I'm taking so much energy up trying to find a meaning that I cannot wait until I'm no longer on this mortal coil. You know, it was so beautiful. And, you know, forgive me again, I often get emotional when I'm talking about this, because these are people. You know, this is not a measure. This is not a questionnaire. This is not, you know, it's statistically significant for an autistic person to feel this or do that. These are people's stories. These are people who were so anxious to be part of my study that they had about 4 or 5 practice runs to get to the, you know, where we're having the interview. So they know they were going to be on time. They knew that they were going to arrive there. And this is why I get so emotionally moved by it, because this was the first time they've been asked. And how simple would it be to sort of reiterate to all the people that we know with autism that just being you is special, just being you adds value. Yeah. Just having your unique take on life gives me a perspective that I've never thought of before. Yeah. And we just don't do it. And the second part of my theory was acceptance. And not just acceptance by others. I think we need to really underpin and really teach people with autism that they can accept themselves. You know, in my theory, what was really interesting for me is that what's sort of the golden thread that pulled it all together was a social comparison theory. Now, most people who talk about people with autism, you know, if I said to Joe Public or Josephine Public, you know, I want to include everybody here, or the theys, you know, whoever they are, you know, describe someone with autism to me. They would say, oh, probably, you know, they'll have either Sheldon Cooper or Rain Man, or they might say somebody who doesn't really acknowledge other people in society, you know, just does their own thing, doesn't really feel emotion, doesn't know how I'm feeling. And I'm like, all of that is wrong. Yeah. You have people with autism, they feel the emotions of others so acutely, even before they enter into a room. And then they're comparing themselves, social comparison, they're comparing themselves against everybody else. Yeah. Yeah. You know, and people don't get that. It's like, you know, so when we talk about acceptance, I think, you know, we need to move the conversation on about autism. You know, all this autism awareness, you know, it's a disservice now for me. Yeah. What we need to do is like, right, we've done all that. You know, if you've not got it after 25 years of people doing it, then, you know, there's something wrong with you. You know? So now we need to move the conversation on in that acceptance, autism acceptance. What does that look like? Yeah. Well, neurotypicals know that for whatever you're doing on a daily basis, someone with autism is going to use 10 to 15% more energy just doing what you're doing. So they're going to be tired at some point. Expect a meltdown. You know, expect them to be abrupt. Expect them, you know, not to have social niceties because they're just too tired. Let's just accept it. You know, and let's just accept that they are who they are, and that doesn't make any judgment on us. You know, parents, just because your child is away, it's not a judgment on you. So if we all were kinder to parents like yourself, you know, you wouldn't feel judged when you go anywhere. You just like feel supported. Yeah. You know, And I like to think of, like if we lived in tribes like we're meant to, when you're tired, Reena, because your son is literally on the ceiling because he's so overstimulated, there'd be somebody to take over from you.
Yeah.
Because there'd be somebody to say, I see your tiredness, Reena, and I'm just gonna come in for a few hours so you can go and have a rest. But we don't live like that. So that's what acceptance is.
Yeah.
And so this is well-being for people with autism.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put a challenge out. Let's start this conversation with your listeners, Reena. The services that you're involved with, do they ever talk about what role and meaning your child has or how accepted your child feels? Because if they don't, let's start that revolution, because I've struggled to get this into NHS, and my findings, they weren't from me, they were from people with autism. Yeah. I was just a storyteller. I was just a person hearing it. It was from people with autism. So for me, when that's not listened to, you're still not being listened to. And I won't stop until you listen to, I can promise you that.
I love it. Please don't stop. But yeah, gosh, there's so much there. I was like mentally bookmarking to pick up on. Where does it start? Where do we start though? So if we're saying, okay, we want to get to a place where autistic individuals feel psychologically safe in society to they accept themselves for the amazingness that each unique being has within them. Does it start in schools? Does it start from home? Where does it start?
I think it has to start with neurotypicals, right? I think it needs to start with neurotypicals saying enough now. So like, let's not cordon off that corner, and that child can go and, and that, that's from a very early setting. So that, like you, when you were saying you felt judged by your wider family and things like that, it has to start there. Why are we judging people? Why are we not accepting that sometimes it's a tough gig being a parent? Well, when I say sometimes, I should, interject that with most times, so it has to start with neurotypicals, because we are the ones who set the rules. We are the ones who say, this is what normal looks like. And I hate normal. I'm just not like you, norms. I don't want to be normal. But for somebody with autism, they're desperate to be normal. They're desperate not to have difference. And why is that? Because we make it so hard for them. So it has to start with neurotypicals. And then where does it go? Right. Parents of people with autism, when you're interjecting with these services, you need to start saying, this is not good enough.
Yeah.
This is not good enough, particularly for those of you who are paying for services. Stop being grateful for the crumbs off the table, because change is not going to happen until we start saying, this is not good enough. Yeah. This is not acceptable. This is not what I foresee as being supportive to me or my family. And I think because going back to the warrior parent again, because there's this acceptance that you have to battle everything, that everything's hard work, that everything that you get is achieved by maximum energy. It enables those services to provide services that are not quite good enough. So, and it's like, I don't want to criticize services who are probably, overextended, but it's like, you need to stop. There needs to be a redesign, and the autistic voice has to be at the center of that.
Yeah.
And it's still not, you can look, if you did a search, Google Scholar, there are other search engines available, but I'm just presuming that not many of your listeners could access university journal, that kind of thing. So I put a caveat there so we don't get you in trouble. Other search engines are available to look at research. You will see in every bit of autism research, in the limitations, it will say that more needs to be done to listen to the autistic voice. Yeah. All of them. They all say it. Even I, who listen to the autistic voice, but more must be done to listen to the autistic voice. There's so much out there. I co-authored a paper looking at how to research with people with autism. This is what we need to do. We need to listen. We need to do service design around what that person with autism needs. And I still don't see that being done. I look in schools, and I can say this with authority, because I had an issue with education. So I did a PGCE, and I could only afford to teach part-time. Because you pay teachers bitters, I had to do my other stuff part-time as well. Because I thought, I cannot criticize education unless I'm willing to get in there and have a look. And I saw so many things. I don't know whether people are scared of people with children with autism, whether children with autism are so damaged by education that they literally retreat into themselves, and they're giving very primal sort of emotion-based responses. There's something not quite right. And we should be supporting those children more. We should be nurturing them. We should be helping them to believe that they're good. Looking at education systems, and particularly what's happened in the pandemic, would sort of give a message loud and clear to children, is that you don't matter, none of you. So if we've done that to all the children, God help children with special needs. God help people, who are literally struggling with their neurodiversity, issues. Yeah. So it's like, but until we say this is not good enough, and also unless we're brave enough and have courage to try something, and this is something else that I think is really important, is that we have such fear of getting things wrong.
Yeah.
That we don't ever want to try to see if we can get it right. So if something's half okay, so say 33% of your population are okay with this, whether they're not, but we don't know what to do with them, but we know it. So we're scared of being able to hold our hand up and say, you know what, we got it wrong, but we've learned from it and we can go. But unless we did this, we wouldn't know what to do. And I think if service providers, particularly, speaking with parents, say, this is like a holistic approach. We need you, you need us. We're gonna figure this out, and we're gonna work together. And some things might work, some things might not, but we can evolve.
Yeah,
we're not gonna be in this place forever.
Yeah.
How would you feel as a parent if that was a conversation had with you?
Yeah. I think the parents I speak to literally feel like they need to armor up. In order to have any kind of meaningful conversation with services. And I think all of it does also come back to investment and resource, and there just isn't enough there. But I feel like, the people who have the most contact with our children are often the teaching assistants and learning assistants.
Yeah.
And they're not even on the radar for being given autism training or any other type of really meaningful special needs training. It's like they're not even, until they're teachers. But yet these are the children, these are the people who are spending hour after hour. They're the ones on the EHCP plan fulfilling that time with your child. And so for me, I've really taken it upon myself to get right in there and have those conversations. But there's a lot of parents who aren't in that space yet where they can do that. And because they're not able to do that yet, the child's not getting the support they need.
Well, I'm just because this is really interesting to me, is that, you mentioned sort of specialist training and neurodiverse sort of focus training, but it's like, do people need training to be kind?
Yeah.
Do people need training just to notice that when a child is in distress, they're not being naughty, they're distressed? Have we really disconnected so much from human beings that we cannot see a child in pain, that we cannot see a child who's confused, that we have to instill our power and control model, which is inherent through society, on the most vulnerable of people? And so I understand that some people might need, specialist training to, particularly in terms of knowing if there's different learning techniques. But I think what you're talking about is when a teaching assistant does not know how to handle with a child who has had too much exposure to too much during the day and can't handle that. Or, the child who's got overexcited because there's so much going on, and it's just like, sit in your chair, absolutely. What child generally can sit down when they've had and this is what I think this, it's like we give excuses. You know, when you talk about investment and we talk about the resources are scarce, blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't know, maybe somebody can correct me, but I don't see kindness as a commodity that has to be purchased, or has no one to give you that memo that's where we are now in 21st century. You want to be kind, that's going to cost you, And I think this is really important. It's like, parents, when you're having that, you're initially going through the forays of having a diagnosis of it, which that in itself comes with a plethora of judgment, of shame. What did I do wrong? Mums, my God, what happened in my pregnancy? What did I do? All of these things, it comes with that. Go armed with, the thing. What do you want, Fiona? I just want you to be kind. I just want you to be understanding. All I want you to do is tell my child he or she is okay as they are. Don't make them feel shame. Don't make them feel different. Let's just accept, because the children in the class will. My children have been in classes with special needs children. From nursery, in fact, and it was just it was just that child. That's just what that child's like. And there's acceptance at that level. And it's only when adults teach children difference is wrong, that as they get older, that they do start that sort of judgmental, bullying, sort of standoffish behavior. But at primary school and at nursery, they're very accepting of difference, exceedingly accepting. And we should capitalize on that.
Totally. Yeah. You mentioned about being kind. Now, I know you're on a movement on kindness, and kindness on a whole other level, the kind of, not your kind of, I don't know, meme or Instagrammable t-shirt type thing, kind. This is being kind on a whole other level. So before we kind of wrap things up, talk to us a bit about your movement.
Yeah, well, I want people to start being kind and do everything in kindness. In terms of, we're not indulging ourselves here. So generally when we say, oh, be kind, it's like, oh, there, and indulging ourselves, oh, I'm going to have a bar of chocolate or anything like that. But for me, when you're kind, it's about that you have a medium and long-term goal in mind, that, what can I do now to soothe and nurture myself so that I can be who and what I want to be in the future? And I think kindness should start with the self. So how can I be kind to me and then move on to other people? Because if you are in a position where you are feeling so isolated, so alone, like nobody understands you, and then you think, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do acts and rise of kindness to other people, and then you don't get any back, you're literally going to start being, feeling what's wrong with me. It's going to perpetuate that I'm not okay. But if you turn that kindness to yourself and start thinking, how can I be more kind to me? How can I stop punishing myself? How can I stop sabotaging everything I'm doing? And move into that space, then things are going to improve. And I just remember once, do you remember, I can't remember what version of the lockdown it was, but I remember it was a January. And I remember, I think my partner was still stuck in New Zealand, which is a whole new other story. And I just remember I used to, at night, it's just like, I'm so tired. I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to have some dark chocolate because that's good for you. Not when you're having 100 grams of green and black every night and going to bed at 5:30. That's not good for you. Got to day 7 of this and I thought, oh my God, I'm indulging myself. That this is not going to end well. And that's the difference. It's like the first night it could be, oh, this is a treat. I'm going to go to bed really early. I'm going to take a good book and some dark chocolate. And convince me, it's dark chocolate, so it's good for you. It's not your Cadbury, so it's good for you. But it's not, that was not going to end well. However, me sort of thinking, right, I've finished work, I'm going to take the children, even if it's just round the block, and we do that every day, that's going to lift our spirits in a week, a month. And that's what being kind really is, not the indulgence. So yeah, I hate Instagram be kind, hashtag be kind. I hate it. And I'm on a mission for people to understand the difference, because that's not kindness. That's like virtue signaling, which isn't kindness whatsoever. Because how kind are you to yourself? Because I can't see it. I can just see quite a lot of pain in you. And how kind are you to other people? So yeah, that's what I'm on a mission to do. Yeah.
Okay, so to those parents who were, I remember that's when I was in that kind of self-sacrifice kind of mode, and to me, the thought of being kind to myself I just equated that with indulgence.
Yeah.
are there any really practical tips you can offer on how we can A, get out of that mindset, and B, actually be kind to ourselves?
Well, I think you have to get, your big boy or big girl pants and pull them right up and recognize that anything that you are sacrificing or not doing for yourself, it's like you're punishing yourself. And in terms of this, it's probably punishing yourself for having a child with autism and then feeling guilty because aren't they amazing? So it's like this, you put it, and it's like, I feel bad for punishing myself. So it's just like literally to recognize that when you are within a situation which is not the general societal norm, you are initially going to have to understand that you're going to have to accept, and acceptance can take a long time. But it's like, it's like acceptance of anything, it's a process, it's like, I'm just going through a process. We're all going through a process, just the whole of life is a process, that's what it throws at you. But it's like having to, a really big tip would be, is like, just accept that you've got to accept. That's the first thing. Just accept that, all right, nobody asked for this, but I've been given it, just accept that.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is like, when you are being kind to yourself, you are not doing things that are going to weaken your systems. It's like, right, I need more energy, so I need to get good sleep at night. I need to get outside and have 10 minutes of sunlight before I do anything else. In winter, it can be a bit tricky. Just get outside as soon as the sun's up. 10 minutes. Anybody can have 10 minutes.
Yeah.
In that 10 minutes, you might want to get your heart rate going, to about 60, 65%. Do some squats. If you're hardcore, do some burpees. Just give yourself that 10 minutes at the start of the day. And that literally will set you up, set your hormones up for a really good day, so you're going to sleep well at night.
Yeah.
If you're exhausted, your poor adrenals might be a bit amok. Make sure that you eat within 10 minutes of getting up, just a small amount, and that can really help with adrenal support. And then the last thing that I want to say, this might be difficult, it's just like laughing is really good. When we laugh, we get a really good hormone that's generated that actually is anti-aging. So you might all want to say, it's like laughter really is one of the best medicines. And just, the final thing that I want to say is that you're not going to get it right ever. So, never ever are you going to get it right for anybody. So as long as you are all right, everybody else around you is going to be all right. And as long as you're feeling buoyant and, I want to say optimistic because I hate hope. Hope for me, it's like, we want to be optimistic, but we don't want to be wanting like a knight in shining armor to come and rescue, which is what I think hope tends to, it's like, and suddenly I was rescued. No, I mean, we don't, because that never happens, does it? You have this like optimism that I've looked after me, so I've got enough to look after you. Yeah. And that really is my top tip, in a very roundabout way.
Oh, I love it. That's the most beautiful note to end on. I've looked after me, so I can look after you. And I think that just really, that is actually very, very powerful. You have been phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible wisdom and giving us your time today. And I feel like this is like the tip of the iceberg, and we could probably have a lot more conversations. So who knows, maybe there'll be a part 2 in the future.
Well, I'm always happy to talk to anybody about, because I hope that's come across that I'm very passionate about autism. They have a special place in my heart, very special place. Yeah. And it makes me laugh. And this is my nice thing is that guaranteed my children can always seek out the special, and it's like, it makes me laugh. Whenever we go anywhere, they're playing on a park, we will get the child who is different to the other children. They're just like drawn to us. And I just think that's just such a wonderful thing that, and it just reminds me that this is really needed. This acceptance is just really needed. Yes. So but thank you so much for having me on. I've enjoyed talking about my passion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And look at the website. You'll see all the resources where you can find out more about Dr. Rachel, sign up for her incredible mail shots, which always have beautiful poetry, affirmations, and just chock full of inspiring content. So all of that is on the website.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Unpacking Autism with Reena Anand. Podcast artwork by Creative Stripes, editing by Adam Jones Lloyd, and music by autistic musician Paul McGowan.